The mortgage payment had already cleared that morning, the same way it had every month since they moved in. It showed up as a line item, clean and final, not asking for anything, not explaining itself. The house was quiet at that hour. The heat clicked on and off. The hallway light was still on from the night before. Nothing about the moment felt dramatic or heavy. It just felt settled. When they bought the house, it had seemed like the responsible thing to do. A real house, in a real neighborhood, with enough space to grow into. The kind of place people pointed to when they talked about stability. The kind of purchase that made parents relax and coworkers nod approvingly. It was not flashy. It was not a stretch by the standards everyone used at the time. The payment fit neatly into the spreadsheet they had built, with room left over. It looked calm on paper. The first year passed in a blur of unpacking and repairs. There were trips to hardware stores and evenings spent assembling furniture that would eventually feel permanent. They learned which floorboard creaked and which window let in a draft when the wind shifted. None of that felt like a cost. It felt like ownership. It felt like putting down roots, even if they didn't use that phrase out loud. Work stayed steady. Commutes got longer, but that was expected. The house was farther out than their old apartment, but the trade-off made sense. More space meant more driving. Everyone said that was how it worked. Gas was just another line item. Time and traffic became part of the day, folded in quietly between responsibilities. As the years went on, the house aged in small, ordinary ways. The roof didn't fail all at once. It just reached the point where patching stopped making sense. The water heater didn't break dramatically. It slowed, then stopped. Appliances lasted almost as long as expected, but never quite. Each replacement felt isolated, manageable, unrelated to the last. None of them were surprises. They were just earlier than hoped. The neighborhood stayed pleasant. Schools were fine. Property values moved the way people said they would. There was never a moment when the purchase seemed like a mistake. That word didn't fit. The house did what it was supposed to do. It held the family. It held their routines. It absorbed birthdays and sick days and quiet weekends. It never asked to be questioned. What changed was not the house, but everything around it. Work shifted. Titles changed. Expectations rose in ways that were not reflected in pay the way they once had been. Raises came, but they arrived smaller and farther apart. Benefits stayed, mostly, which was reassuring. Health coverage mattered more as time passed. That stability became part of the reason they stayed put, both professionally and physically. Moving stopped feeling simple. Selling the house would mean timing the market, coordinating school years, explaining choices that would look confusing to people who remembered how excited everyone had been when they bought it. The house was no longer just a place, it was a record of being sensible at a specific moment in life. Undoing it would feel like revising history, so they stayed. They refinanced once when rates dropped, which felt like a small win. The payment changed, but not enough to alter the shape of their life. It didn't create space, it just made things slightly less tight. The house still dictated the minimum income required to keep everything in place. That number lived quietly in the background of every decision, even when no one named it. Career opportunities appeared and passed without much discussion. Some required relocation, some required uncertainty. None of them lined up neatly with the obligations attached to the house. The mortgage was fixed, but everything else around it was not. Childcare costs rose. Insurance premiums crept upward. Property taxes adjusted themselves without asking. The house absorbed all of it. It was steady, unmoving, and heavy in the way permanent things are. It did not bend when circumstances changed. It did not shrink when income growth slowed. It simply remained, requiring the same level of commitment every month, regardless of how flexible the rest of life needed to be. Vacations became shorter and closer to home, not because of one clear decision, but because time off had to fit around work that could not easily be replaced. Taking risks felt different with a fixed payment attached to a fixed address. The house didn't prevent anything directly. It just narrowed the range of choices that felt reasonable. Maintenance continued in the background. There was always something nearing the end of its lifespan. Paint faded. Landscaping demanded attention. Each task was small enough to delay, but not forever. The house never broke down all at once. It aged the way responsibilities age, gradually, without ceremony. At some point, the rooms stopped feeling large, not because they shrank, but because life filled them. Storage bins multiplied, closets became crowded. The extra space that had once justified the purchase no longer felt like a luxury. It felt neutral. Necessary, maybe, but not expansive. The commute wore on quietly. Hours spent driving added up over years, not weeks. There was no single moment of exhaustion, just a gradual acceptance that this was where time went. Mornings started earlier, evenings ended sooner. The house waited at the end of it, unchanged. Friends moved closer to cities, or farther away, or into smaller places after children left home. Each move came with a story, a reason, a sense of transition. Their own address stayed the same. Stability, once achieved, did not naturally come with markers of progress. It just continued. The mortgage balance declined, but slowly. Seeing the number drop was satisfying in a muted way. It confirmed that time was passing and payments were doing what they were meant to do. But the decline did not translate into liquidity or freedom. It existed mostly as reassurance. There were moments of comparison, usually unspoken. Others seemed to have more flexibility, more options, more room to adjust. It was hard to say whether that was true or just the result of different trade-offs. The house had been a choice that closed certain doors quietly, without ever slamming them. By the time the house felt fully integrated into their identity, it had already done most of its work. It had shaped routines, spending patterns, and tolerance for risk. It had influenced career decisions without ever being mentioned in those conversations. It had become a constant reference point, even when it was not directly relevant. There was no regret attached to it exactly. Regret implies a mistake, and this did not feel like one. The house had delivered what it promised: shelter, stability, predictability. It simply asked for more in return than had been visible at the beginning. As income flattened, the fixed costs became more noticeable. Not burdensome, but immovable. Adjustments had to happen elsewhere. Discretionary spending tightened, savings rates fluctuated. The house remained untouched by those shifts. Aging parents entered the picture in new ways. Travel needs changed. Time became more fragmented. Being tied to a specific place complicated things that might have been simpler with fewer anchors. The house was not the cause. It was just part of the equation. There were weekends spent doing yard work instead of resting, evenings spent reviewing bills instead of planning. These were not dramatic sacrifices. They were accumulations, small exchanges of energy and attention that added up over years. The house appreciated, on paper. That fact came up occasionally, usually when someone mentioned the market. But appreciation did not feel like wealth in any practical sense. It could not be accessed without disrupting everything else. It existed as a number that required selling to matter. By the time selling felt conceivable, it also felt late. The reasons for staying had changed, but they were still there. Community ties, school districts, familiarity. The house had aged alongside them. It carried their history in ways that were not transferable. Looking back, the decision to buy early still made sense in context. Rents were rising, stability was valued, predictability felt like protection. The long-term cost was not visible because it was not a single cost. It was a pattern that unfolded slowly, embedded in everyday life. The house never demanded acknowledgement for that role. It just stood there, solid and quiet, receiving payments and time and attention. It did not care whether those resources could have been used differently. It only reflected the choice that had already been made. Years later, the mortgage payment still clears each month. The number has become familiar, almost invisible. The house is still doing its job. The cost has already been paid, not all at once, but continuously, in ways that never required a decision point. It simply became part of how life settled and stayed there.